the Amazon metaphor, P2P needs to be more like a GPS. My name is Sheena Smith, and I'm the Director of Client Engagement here at Spend Matters. I'll be running things behind the scenes today, so please feel free to chat me directly if you have any questions or comments throughout the event. We have a fantastic group of extremely knowledgeable procurement people who will be presenting today, and I know they're eager to get started. But before we do, I'd like to run through a couple housekeeping items. Our most asked question is, will I receive a copy of the slides? And you can rejoice because the answer is yes. We'll send you an email that includes both the slides and a link to watch the recorded event within 24 hours. We love to promote as much audience interaction as possible, so if you need clarification on a point or have a comment or question for the speakers at any time, please do not hesitate to jump in by using the questions panel. One last quick thing, a survey is going to pop up as the webinar closes. Please take 2 minutes to fill it out to help us improve our future programming. We're thrilled to be presenting with Richard Waugh from today's event sponsor, Zycus, as well as Scott Fitzgerald, Director of Procurement at the Mentor Network. If you're familiar with Spend Matters, our Chief Research Officer, Pierre Mitchell, will need little introduction, but before we get into his section, I'd like to ask Richard to run through our agenda today.
Thanks, Sheena, and welcome everyone. I do think we have an exciting agenda planned for you today, and we'll have Pierre set the stage and start us out looking at the metaphor of a GPS, in this case maybe a guided procurement system, and how that really is positioned to help end users, supply seekers, quickly and easily find the sources of preferred supply, so make it easier for them to do the right thing. I'll talk a little bit about the P2P process itself, maybe a little bit of a misnomer in that there's no single monolithic process. There are actually multiple processes, and there's a simple flow, let's call it the happy path. But we'll talk a little bit and share some benchmark data about the various detours along that happy path and really build the case for why guided buying is so critical. And have Scott Fitzgerald from the Mentor Network take us through a case study of how his organization is really embracing this concept of guided buying and where they're going along that path. And we'll have a chance to follow up with him on some questions and take questions from the audience as well. So without any further ado, let me turn it over to Pierre.
Thanks, Richard, and thanks everybody for attending. I'm very, very happy to be here today with you and with such a great panel of presenters. So for those of you who've seen me present before, you should rejoice in knowing that I only have 5 slides today. So I'm going to go pretty quickly through my stuff, and so that we can get right over to Scott and talk and look at some of the case study, his transformation that he's done over at the Mentor Network, and we'll get it to Q&A. So in terms of the content today, in terms of the GPS metaphor, and we're going to play with GPS here, both as kind of the global positioning system, but also from a guided procurement system. And the notion here is basically, everybody talks about kind of the Amazon experience and bringing that to e-procurement in B2B. But in GPS, the idea here is really a system for positioning those in the company that are looking for supply and helping them find preferred supply and sending them down the right path in an easy way so that they can kind of get what they're looking for. And because they have day jobs, and if you're a molecular biologist, you want those folks spending time finding new molecules, not searching around on the corporate intranet trying to look for the supplies that they're the lab supplies or whatever that they're looking for. So the problem here is from a procurement standpoint, sourcing itself doesn't save any money, and you have to be ultimately, the moment of truth is when somebody is trying to find something and they do have a need, to really help guide them to the right source of supply. Now that might be an electronic catalog if it's something that's very straightforward, office supplies. It could be a punch-out type catalog. It could be something where local supplies are stored in like MRO or something in a local storeroom. Might also be that you've never really sourced it before at all, and you want to get it to the right category manager, right person in procurement to be able to source it. That might be a quick buy, might be a quick 3 bids and a buy, might be more of a strategic source. So, it could be something in between where you're looking for some temp services, and or generally what the category is, but the end user has to put in some parameters, and ultimately it will guide them to, the right path for them. So just because you source it doesn't mean, you got to get that final mile. And, that can only really be complicated when you are using, traditional ERP or e-procurement systems that are not very easy to use, kind of managing this particularly on this long tail of spend for more of your ad hoc or low volume types of purchases. And, dealing whether it's a blue screen or whatever type of, system you're using, end users do get frustrated, and that is one of the challenges with e-procurement. Like I put up the Dilbert cartoon here, self-service is great if that self-service tool is actually helping someone really get to where they're trying to go, so that, procurement's not just pushing off their work on someone else, and that just doesn't create, goodwill, and your, procurement CUSAT scores, if you measure that kind of a thing, are gonna definitely go down. So you have to balance these trade-offs, and these trade-offs are really, there's a few of them. So if you think about kind of the players here, obviously we talked about the requisitioner, talked about procurement, but also the supplier's perspective, and also from your internal partners, finance and IT. They bring their own, other functional partners, HR. They're going to bring their own sets of requirements, to the process. So the idea is, how do you, get the requisitioners what they need, but get it from preferred supply, and again, and that is not just the right supplier, but also the right path by which you want to get that preferred supply. So you don't want someone using their T&E system or P cards to kind of, do some maverick spending, maybe inadvertently or whatever, but you want to really make it easy for them to do the right things. And as part of that, you're going to have the visibility and the monitoring and the compliance, and safely. What I mean by safely is, to kind of proactively make sure there's not just no, maverick spending, but also that, the information is put in correctly, and it is going to be in compliance with whatever regulatory compliance is, that is requirements that are out there. Make sure there's no fraud. Build in all those controls, and use technology to kind of allow you to not have a big trade-off between controls and compliance and efficiency and customer stakeholder satisfaction as they're looking for. So to reduce these trade-offs, you need a bunch of things, right? You need to be able to do all that hard work, do your strategic sourcing, get the right processes in place. And this doesn't happen overnight, obviously, and Scott will talk about this. But also, get the right operating model in place. Do you want to use shared services or a third party, use a buying desk, and of course have the right technology that kind of brings it all together. So this notion of guided buying is something that, I've been talking about for over a decade now, and it was really kind of taking this notion of guided selling, which is very much of a seller-driven thing, to really putting the buyer in control and allowing procurement working with the requisitioners to kind of, guide them to the right supply sources, but make it a process that is not necessarily delight, but a process, but certainly enjoyable, something that is it's a straightforward process, it's intuitive, it's a walk-up interface, and ultimately it's going to meet these, diverse objectives. So, okay, great. Well, how do we do that? Well, let's learn from the consumerization that's out there. So, if you think about GPS in terms of global positioning, it enables mobile, social, Internet of Things, all that, whether it's smartphones or devices. The key thing about this technology is it knows who you are, it knows where you are. If based on history, it might have an idea of where you want to go and what you've maybe purchased before. And using that kind of information, it'll really help kind of take you down the right kind of the right path. So certainly there are some common traits on the consumer side, on the B2C side, that you see in the B2B side, right? You want this to be mobile, and whether it's an app or it's browser-based, whether it's on your smartphone or on your computer, doesn't matter. It should be a nice user interface. It should be simple, walk-up interface. It should run globally. It should be multilingual, multi-currency, all the multis that you would expect, certainly too as a enterprise class procurement system. And it should be a smart system. It should be something that gets smarter and smarter over time, more predictive. And if you think about kind of, Google and these types of tools that use machine learning, what are we talking about? Auto classification, pattern matching, these types of things. And if you're familiar with spend analysis, you're very familiar to say, hey, those terms sound familiar in terms of auto classification and these types of AI-based systems. It's just a slightly different context, and what we're talking about now is bringing that up front into the process to classify what you're looking for and who you are, to then guide you before the spend occurs. So it's really almost real-time spend and supply analysis to get you where you want to go versus this kind of forensic spend analysis. So knows who you are, predicts what you're looking for, and tries to kind of guide you with some relevant recommendations, kind of knowing who you are and what you're trying to do. So this is a key piece. So I mean, when you think about your process flows in, let's say, source to pay, not just purchase to pay, it's important to kind of think about the process from a stakeholder standpoint. Really starts with that moment of truth, and when saying, I need something, I want to now search for supply. And at that point, do you make it easy for them to find you, if it's not something that's a catalog item and it's never been sourced before, to find the item if it is in that catalog, or if it is a punch-out, or whatever that preferred path is, how well do you actually make it easy for them? And at that point, there might be a feedback loop back into a strategic source if you've got it on a wave plan in sourcing, or maybe it's going to be a tactical buy. Maybe it's going to be a 3 bids and a buy type of process before you then kind of go into the buying and the paying. So this kind of search for supply is kind of a key linchpin between sourcing and buying, and it really is very stakeholder-centric. So the technology in the B2B side, really there's some very practical things about this. It knows who you are, so it knows what your roles are that you play, because you might play multiple roles in different categories. And whether you're a power buyer or the casual requisitioner, you're going to have different dollar limits on your budgets. You're going to have different suppliers you might be able to see with specialized masking. There's going to be all sorts of functionality that might be tuned based on who you are. And then as you start to look for something, you want some nice smart forms and nice technology that says, you type in, mouse, and it says, okay, do you mean a computer peripheral, or do you mean a lab, lab animal? And if it's lab animal, you go in a requisition form, to your your commodity manager. But if it's a peripheral, maybe it punches you out to the Dell website, or whatever. It's that kind of thing where you're trying to really use that information to understand what you're looking for, and get as much information as you can from the system and from the buyer to take you as far as you can go. And then if you do need a system, a human assist, that's when you kind of then feed it into procurement. And from there, hopefully you have some information filled in. Hopefully you're using smart forms that might be category specific, et cetera. That's going to really just shrink down the cycle time, and that's going to be really good, good for everybody. It's good for procurement, and it's good for the stakeholders. So a few thoughts, and then I'm going to turn this over to Richard. I think it's going to then turn over to Scott. First, just keep it simple and really take that employee-centric, mindset about how to make it easy for them to do the right thing, just like you have in travel systems, in terms of, picking the right hotel and the right rental car, et cetera. Make it easy to do the right thing. Second of all, this is not just a technology capability. This is a philosophy, right? So the more in which you can guide them to set up those preferred sources of supply and the processes around that, having only, let's say, 6, 7 ways in which you buy and pay for goods, that's going to be really useful. And then, help improve those linkages between P2P and sourcing. These should not be silos. They all need to work together, and there should be feedback loops back to sourcing and back to procurement, so that when people aren't finding anything, you also understand why is it that they're not finding what they're looking for. Rather than just slapping their hand with a maverick spend, try to understand what is the issue, because maybe we didn't get those folks, properly enough at the time of sourcing. And you know what? Needs are always changing. So that feedback loop is important, and it's important to learn as both a procurement organization and also in the technology. So it's important stuff. It's valuable. You can measure it. We'll talk about maybe some of the measurement stuff on the Q&A side. But, it's an area where we're pretty early on here. There are some progressive providers here, like Zycus, doing this kind of stuff, and some practitioners who are pushing the envelope a bit. But hey, that's why you guys are here, to kind of learn from these folks. And with that, I am going to go ahead and pass it over to Richard.
Thanks very much, Pierre. That's a great lead-in to the rest of the topic that we're going to cover here today on guided buying. So wanted to talk real quickly then about that Amazon that everyone is searching for, that kind of nirvana, and maybe we'll call it the happy path in this case. And wouldn't it be nice if every P2P transaction followed this happy path where a user can come in, search a catalog for a standard commodity type product, fill a cart, check it out, and have the system take over from there. Route that requisition through an automated workflow process, generating then a touchless PO that's delivered electronically to the supply base via a standard such as CXML or EDI or through a supplier portal. And then on the back end, automate that three-way matching process as well by aggregating the receiving report, the e-invoice, as well as the PO to execute that three-way or two-way match. And then in the best of all possible worlds, an electronic payment that closes the loop, an electronic funds transfer, or maybe a P-card transaction. So certainly that's a goal, but again, the idea is that it's not a one-size-fits-all. Not every transaction will follow this happy path. There are actually multiple P2P processes, hence the need for guided buying. So just to kind of shed some more light on why this is so important here, there are numerous detours along that happy path. And really to point out the need for that in the first place is, if you look at the benchmark data, this coming from the Hackett Group, that shows that even the top performers, so world-class P2P organizations, are only capturing less than a quarter of their spend and somewhat higher transaction volume, about 42% of transactions, through catalog-based purchasing. So that's at kind of its full ramp, fully penetrated. That happy path would only address less than 25% of the purchase transactions, and that's for the best of the best. So overall, the peer group has 94% off catalog spending. So the need for a guided path, especially to drive users to those transactions that are off catalog but on contract. So how do I find all the other things that I need to buy, especially services or non-standard products that are on contract but may not be on a catalog-based buy? The second instance then, let's call it the buyer-guided path. So this is when a user can't find what he wants either on the catalog or on the contract, and a buyer needs to intervene. And if he doesn't, there's a significant potential for maverick purchasing. And you see a wide disparity here between the top quartile, the top performers, and everyone else. And basically 6 times higher lost savings due to maverick spending for the bottom quartile versus the top performer. So significant exposure in that case without guided buying to structure that process. In the last instance, we'll call it the breadcrumb path. So this is the dreaded no PO invoice that really shows a lack of control over that purchasing transaction in the first place, not having it on a PO. An invoice shows up. So the breadcrumbs are going back to try to figure out what happened, who authorized this purchase, why was it made, sometimes actually issuing a PO after the fact to sort of cover those tracks, and much higher than you might think. So even the best of the best here, again, the world-class performers, see 1 in 5 invoices that are no PO, and significantly higher for everyone else, about 38%. So hence the need for guided buying to really address multiple P2P processes. So to make the case then for guided buying, it's really about how do I get control over the majority of spend. So not just catalog-based requisitions, but off-catalog as well. And then it's steering users to those approved suppliers and not just compliant purchases from contract vendors, but following the correct buy-pay channel, the correct approval process, and make sure that that particular transaction is accurately coded and classified so that on the back end you're able to leverage accurate line item level spend visibility and employing that auto classification technology that Pierre referred to, in this case on the front end to get the order right when it's placed, correctly coded and classified, instead of the way spend analysis has been applied historically on the back end, kind of cleaning up those errors after the fact. And in the process then simplify that user experience, increase adoption, and start to achieve those kind of world-class performance numbers. So that's the case for guided buying. But I think it's really interesting to hear from a practitioner that's implementing a guided buying approach. And like to turn it over to Scott to share his experience from the Mentor Network.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Richard, for introducing me. Welcome, everybody, this afternoon. Let me see here. Okay. First, I wanted to give you a little bit of background on the Mentor Network. We were founded in 1980, and we're a national network of local health and human services providers. We provide services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, children with behavioral and emotional challenges, people with medically complex conditions, and individuals recovering from brain and spinal cord injuries. Okay. All right. Just trying to move forward here. Bear with me. Oh, sorry. Jumped ahead. The Mentor Network, we have 27,000 employees. We're located in 34 states and over 2,000 locations, so we're very geographically dispersed. We also we have all of our 4 main operating groups working together. With Mentor, REM, Neurorestorative, and Care Meridian. And I'm just having an issue with the slide here. It's not forwarding.
Scott, I'm happy to jump in and drive your slides if you need me to.
Okay. And as I mentioned, here are our 4 trademarks that we do business under. If you can move to the next slide, please. And just here, just kind of do a little plug. If you know anybody that requires these type of services, or you know anybody that's interested in becoming a foster parent, here's our website. So I just wanted to get that out for everybody just because of the great mission that the company's doing. So if we can move to the next slide, I can tell you a little bit about the procurement department. I actually joined Mentor. I'll be there 2 years next month. And as part of the background, there was a staff of 4 plus a director. Commodities weren't assigned to anybody. You knew somebody in procurement, and that's who you called for everything. There were only 30 contracts that I could find that had been documented and signed and managed by procurement. I went through and did an analysis of and determined what I felt would be sourceable spend, which procurement could have an impact, and that came out to be $200 million. And prior to my starting my change, there was $36 million in spend under management out of the $200 million being addressed by procurement. Historically, a $2.5 million savings. We had 20,000 purchase orders, 18,000 requisitions. But as Richard had mentioned about the crumb path, there are 529,000 accounts payable payment transactions annually, of which about 70–75% of those are directly supplier related. And because of some issues we have with systems and not being able to fully scale out our transactional system, there are 6,000 P cards, which means there are 6,000 buyers out there doing whatever they have to do to get the job done. My year 1 strategy, I first reorganized the staff by commodity and by the line of business. So each individual on my staff is a subject matter expert in a particular commodity group. They're also each assigned as a single point of contact for each of the business units. So if somebody can't find widgets on the commodity list, they have somebody that they can call and get the answer. After the first year, we had 110 contracts under management. I had built a new Salesforce to try to keep tracking them and track particular terms. We're still on the $200 million in addressable spend. However, after the first year, we had $60 million in spend under management, and currently, year to date, this year, we're at $90 million in spend under management. I increased the savings target, even without full training processes, the reorganization going on. Bumped it up to $3 million. We actually saved $7 million. This year, our target is $6 million, and we're on target to do about $6.5 million. And as part of what the next point in my reorganizing the department is to bring the department away from a transactionally focused team to one that's more strategic, and part of that is automating more of the PO and invoicing process so they can save their time to do more strategic initiatives. If you go to the next slide, please. Some of the issues that we have with our current Oracle iProcurement environment, it's number one, it's a server-based network, so you have to be on our network to access it. As I mentioned, we've got over 2,000 locations across the country. A lot of those are residential facilities or group homes that may have internet access, but they don't have access to the network. So, you know, right there, that's one of the limitations in rolling out the PO system. The system itself, does not have an ease of use to it. For a client base who are care providers who are very not technically savvy and, you know, want everything really easy, don't have the time or the inclination to try to figure it out and find it. Oracle is just too difficult. You have to know what you're doing. If you're in there every day, it's a great tool, but it's not intuitive if you go in there occasionally. We also, in order for us to add more supplier catalogs, it's a 2-month lead time from our IT to be able to assist us in building those catalogs. So I have no scalability on adding additional supplier catalogs to make the buying experience easier for my users. Licenses are based on the company revenue, so regardless of how many users we have, whether it be 1 or 27,000, we're paying the same price. And also, one of our policies is when we have contractors or temporary help, we do not give them access to Oracle. So if we have a contractor filling in for an administrative assistant and that assistant ordered office supplies, we can't backfill with that. And then one of the more important ones is the approval workflow. And any time we need any workflow changes, we have to submit a formal request, or what we call a SURF, to IT and get in line with everybody else, which poses a challenge, particularly with turnover in the company. And on the right, you see specifically some additional pain points. There's no feedback loop for people to get back to us easily. So most of the time, we don't hear anything until we talk to someone, and then we hear about all their problems for the last 5 years. The second thing is part of putting in place a new PO transactional system, is right now there's about 20% of our general ledger coding is correct. Individuals will code it to whatever is easiest, whatever they coded the last time. Office supplies is a huge spend that needs a lot of data cleansing. The quarterly business reviews tend to be more of reporting statistics rather than trends, strategy, trying to learn from what we've done and be able to replicate that across multiple suppliers. Also, the spend process and what we have in our database doesn't allow for normalization of the vendor name prior to us categorizing it, so we're going to be addressing that. And then there are no tools in place to actively monitor spend trending over time. Right now, what we have to do every time we want to look at that, we have to run a report, wait for the report, and then take the report and manually manipulate the data to get it in a format that we're looking for. Next slide, please. And here we have a poll question.
Yeah, so we're curious about what the audience thinks here. So I'm going to pop up the poll question here. What is the greatest challenge your organization has faced with P2P? Is it low user adoption? Is it the inability to gain compliance on a majority of your spend? Do you lack visibility to accurate spend transactions? Is it long lead times for supplier onboarding? Or is your P2P model just not scalable? So we'll allow for about 10 more seconds here, and then I'll show the results on screen, and all of our speakers can comment on them.
Looks like you can only pick one.
All right, wrapping up, and here's the results. What do you think, speakers?
Well, I agree. I mean, part of like the highest there is lack of visibility to accurate spend transactions, which in procurement is key to find opportunities.
Yep.
Agree for everyone? All right,
Yeah.
Scott. We'll let you forge forth.
Okay. So where we are right now at Mentor is we're in the process of finalizing our configuration and implementation and testing of the Zycus P2P platform. And part of the reason we picked Zycus was, first off, I would say ease of use. With the guided buying, what it does is it, instead of currently where users have to, they're looking for a product, it's in supplier A's catalog, they drill down, they pick the product, add it to the cart. They need a second product, they have to go back up, drill down in another catalog. What guided buying, and particularly the search feature, allows them to do is enter in key terms, and the system slowly brings them to the correct item. Particularly if we have contracted suppliers, it brings them to our contracted supplier with the pricing. It also allows us for any internally hosted, which is non-punch-out catalogs. It allows to do cross-catalog searches. So if you buy, for instance, rubber gloves, and you have 4 suppliers providing the exact same glove, the users now can, similarly like they do online when they're ordering, they can look at each of the suppliers and compare pricing. So it's kind of an easy way for people to kind of look to make sure they're getting competitive pricing. Next slide, please.
Actually, real quick, I'm going to stop you there. We have 2 audience questions real quick. I think the first one is probably for you and Pierre, and then the second one is specific to Scott. So it has to do with the catalogs. It kind of fits in right here. The first one is, what seems to be the trend? Punch-out catalogs or hosting your own supplier catalogs? Pierre, do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of provide my 2 cents just based on what I see kind of across different companies. I think the key thing here is there's always going to be some suppliers where punch-out just works well. I mean, there's always challenges with punch-out when you use it, in terms of making sure that you work with the supplier to not try to do a lot of upsells and things like that, and making sure they can mask the catalogs and all that type of stuff. I think the biggest thing, there definitely has been a trend away from kind of the locally hosted, replicated content from the suppliers down to the buyers, behind the firewall. I think that more and more there is kind of, people are looking for basically the the unified search, which goes across, could be a third-party, a third-party aggregator, or just any type of service provider, content provider, as well as to show the items that are the punch-out items. And once you find it, then you can actually punch out and get the final information in terms of availability and pricing and that kind of thing. So that unified kind of search experience. So there's definitely a trend from kind of just the locally hosted catalog, but whether it's going to be punch-out or a third-party aggregated, it depends a little bit based on your spend and the suppliers that that you're hooking up to. So,
Great,
yeah, and I agree. I think also punch-out catalogs, there's a couple of things. Number one, I view it as more commodities that are, high volume, high transaction counts, and low risk. And for instance, computer equipment, office supplies, medical supplies. So it's what you're trying to do is automate it as much as possible. And typically, what happens, what I've seen is the larger suppliers that do have technical resources and typically will have their own web presence are a lot more akin to doing a punch-out, whereas you may have, and in one of my cases is it's a safety supplier. We buy 3 items from the company, so we have a local catalog, and the only thing that changes on the items is the price goes down as I negotiate better deals. But
yep.
But that's where I think the difference is, where it's really if the supplier has the capabilities you want. But if there's very limited number of products, or they just don't have the resources available, you'd go with a local catalog.
Excellent. Excellent. And then real quick question, Scott, you can parry for later if you like, but can you explain what you mean for catalog onboarding since it takes 2 months for an IT resource?
Okay, well, because Oracle it's a mainframe application. In order for us to get the communications together, we use VPN tunnels at the moment. We're going to HTTPS, but to get the communications together, to get the test systems up and running, to also work with the supplier's technical staff to make sure that everything works correctly, is integrated correctly. For our internal resources, that's a 2-month process. So from when I submit a request saying I want to add another supplier catalog, it's going to take about 2 months for them to finish it. So I'm losing 2 months of my negotiated savings.
Well, hopefully that answers our audience members' questions, and I'll go ahead and push your slide forward.
Hey, Scott, have you looked at IT outsourcing at all as a spend area? That's a joke.
I don't think our CIO would appreciate that.
Everybody underneath him. Everybody underneath him.
There you go. All right. The next, as I mentioned, part of the guided buying, it steers the requisitioners to preferred suppliers, preferred products, and it also lets them be able to filter the results of their search and compare side by side. Next slide, please. And navigation, and one of the thing about ease of use is that with the Zycus tool, it's in addition to the guided buying, there's a section with e-forms, and we are going to be loading in a lot of e-forms for some of the off-catalog requisitions. We have what's called a SURF form for our capital items, which are going to be it's going to be a new e-form. It's paper right now. So what it does is this is going to give us the opportunity to, or if something isn't on a catalog, that will give them an easy way of being able to find it based upon the commodity grouping. Next slide, please. And what also guided buying allows is you'll have requesters who will say, I need a pink rain hat that's size 12. And they can go in and do a search and find out exactly what they want. But for those users who may not know exactly what they're looking for, it also the guided buying allows them to answer certain questions describing what they're looking to do or what they're looking to purchase, and what it does is it slowly pushes them into pre-negotiated pricing, preferred product, preferred suppliers, without having to have any free-form POs that we need an interpreter in the purchasing department to figure out what is it that they want, because typically those generate a phone call and a discussion anyway, and what this is trying to do is get the individual for kind of semi-self-service to focus down on exactly what you need. It's typical when you're doing any type of sourcing initiative in procurement. The toughest part is to get a specification out of somebody, but it's the most valuable information for me to use. So with this, this set specifications allows people who don't know specifically what they need. It, by answering a series of questions, pushes them to that final product. Next slide, please. And then one of the other items that we're implementing in the guided buying is express checkout. We, as part of our configuration, in order to clean the data by GL accounts that it's being charged against, we are setting up default general ledger accounts categories. So with somebody, they'll go in and say this is an IT category, it's going to get charged to IT. If when they log in and this is Scott's ordering a computer, Scott's name is the requester, all of Scott's delivered to information, department information will all pop up. If I turn around and I'm buying on behalf of somebody else, the person I'm buying on behalf of, all of their address information for delivery, all of their department information is going to pop up. So it makes it a lot easier that the buyers don't have to go, or the requisitioners don't have to go in and fill out what's my department name? What GL am I charging it to? It's all going to default because, as I mentioned, we have a lot of caregivers out there, and they don't know one general ledger account from another. And by us giving them and helping them with this information, not only do we eliminate confusion, but the reporting on what we're actually spending is going to be 10 times more accurate. And then the other functionality that we allow individuals to do is they can split out the cost to multiple departments very easily. They could set up templates with the split out, and so we're just trying to make it so once they're done finding what they need, they get in, they get out, minimal amount of clicks, they hit checkout, and the order's gone. Next slide, please. The next benefit from guided buying is visibility. Number one is looking at saying, okay, how can I easily see how much am I spending with this supplier? I may have negotiated pricing on a $50,000 a year spend, and we're running at a $250,000 pace. So that gives us the information that we need to go back and renegotiate. Right in the middle, halfway down on the left, you can see the procurement workflow. As part of workflow, the individuals will be getting, for approvals, will be getting emails. And what the email shows is it doesn't just say you have an order to approve, go log into the system and approve it. It shows the entire order, who's ordering it, where it's getting charged, and then at the bottom, as part of workflow, it shows the approver, where is it in the workflow, who's already approved it, who's seen it, where does it have to go next. So what this does is it gives a lot more visibility for our requisitioners to say, hey, the old wives' tale, oh, I put the requisition in our office to procurement, and I don't know what's going on. They've had it for months, and procurement may not get to procurement for a week. So, but we're as everyone on the call probably knows, we get blamed for that week delay. Next slide, please. Mobility. What is great about the guided buying is, it allows individuals to not only approve but receive requisitions on from an email on a smartphone or an iPad without having to even log into the application. You get the email, as I mentioned at the bottom. It could say approve, reject, you can add comments, and the minute you hit approve, it's off. It's integrated with the system, and there's no more work for the approvers. So we're not taking up a lot of their time as part of this process. Next slide, please. So where we are right now, as I mentioned, we're finalizing our go live date. It's going to be within the next 30 days. We have 90 users and approvers from all across Mentor, multiple states, multiple corporate departments, multiple divisions. We have 40 suppliers, including 3 punch-out catalogs. Our payment methods, which we're going to be rolling out in the pilot, we're going to be able to pay by check, by EFT, P-card, or Ghost card. As for our back-end financial system, that's still going to be Oracle Financials, and we've developed 2 interfaces. One is a payment feed to Oracle. So once the 3-way match of the PO, the invoice, and the receipt is complete within a P2P, it sends multiple times a day a payment file to Oracle that matches up with our supplier database within Oracle, and all it does is send instructions to process the payments, and therefore eliminating our accounts payable from having to manually enter in all of those invoices, of which 528,000 happened last year. The other feed we have is it's a cost center feed from Oracle. We have a lot because we grow through acquisition. We do minor divestitures. We close departments. We open up new ones. We constantly are having our departments being added and deleted. So we have twice a day we're going to have a cost center feed from Oracle. So once the change is made in Oracle, we're going to get it within 4 hours to make sure that all of the department numbers and names are up to date and accurate, so we don't have any reconcilement issues down the road. We're also implementing full workflow. So we have built it so based upon our approval matrix, depending on either the commodity or the value of the order, it will automatically route to the right appropriate level of approval versus our company policies. And we have developed custom reporting. One of the reports we've developed is for our fixed assets team, so they now can be able to go in instead of running a full PO report, looking through everything, determining what has been capitalized and if it should, what hasn't been capitalized and it should be. They're actually going to be able to just put in a date range and be able to look up by general ledger account or PO, whatever they need to be able to capitalize those items that we need to depreciate. And we've also set that up so down the line it can be an automated feed to any type of system that our fixed asset team may implement in the future. And we're looking for a full rollout starting Q3, possibly Q4 of this year, depending on how well the pilot goes, which, and Rich will agree with me, it's going to go excellent. Next slide.
Absolutely, Scott. Thanks very much. And you know, I know we'll probably have some additional questions from the audience, but I have one or two, and I think Pierre may have a couple as well, just to kind of follow up on that case study that you just shared with us. And you know, from the outset, with the title of our topic for today, Forget the Amazon Metaphor, we're kind of suggesting that you know, you have to look beyond Amazon, but nevertheless, whether it's Amazon or a GPS metaphor that we're using, everyone is trying to achieve more of that consumer type buying experience. And interested in your thoughts, Scott, in a corporate buying environment, what ways do you think the buying process needs to emulate the consumer shopping experience, and in what ways is it different?
Okay, well, I think in part of just, you know, some of the feedback that I've gotten from my internal users are, it has to be, number one, it has to be easy to use. You know, it's something where, you know, individuals want to go in, you know, it's easy to log in, it's easy to search for something, and then once they find it, check out. They want to be able to save templates. I order the same thing every month. I want to save the template. You know, so that way I go in and find the template, 3 or 4 clicks, I'm done. But I think what is the differences between corporate and the consumer is, even with the Amazon, there is no real guided buying. It's a lot of hit and miss. You put in certain search terms and hopefully what you're looking for pops up. Where with the guided buying in a corporate environment, you know, that search term isn't there, and then you get a results, oh, that's not good, let's try another one. It allows you to ask questions, and it slowly, like a GPS, points you in the right direction. So instead of looking perhaps at a result list with 300 items on it, you're now looking at a result list with 3. And it can help you find exactly what you're looking for.
Good. I guess this, Pierre, I got a question. So, I mean, from a change management, I mean, I know you're about to kind of get into the full rollout, but just, I mean, are there any kind of things that, you know, if somebody is, you know, doing some process change and some data changes, you know, it's not like, hey, everything works fine except for just the technology, and then you just put a technology change. You know, are there any things that you'd recommend to others in terms of, you know, like the gotchas in terms of, is it, you know, is it the dirty data? Is it setting up the processes at you know, in terms of a level of detail that maybe wasn't before? I mean, what are some of the prerequisites? You know, is it maybe the support model of how you work with folks that are highly distributed? I mean, it sounds like you have a pretty distributed user base. I mean, just any, I know you're kind of in the midst of it, but just any kind of lessons learned as you're going through it around just some of the things to kind of watch for in, let's say, a highly distributed type of environment?
No, absolutely. I would say, you know, the one thing I can't stress more enough is, if you're looking at any type of automation or replacing a system, I highly recommend you redesign the process first, because I've seen a lot of instances, having, you know, a bit of a technology background, where a user department may look for a solution and they find a software application, then they turn and design their process to fit the application. What you need to do is design your process and then go out and find the application that either fits it perfectly or is configurable that can do what you want to do. You don't want the technology driving your business. You want the technology to support the business.
Right.
And then secondly, I would say, it's one of the gotchas is, as pulling together our project team, which include a lot of support partners, accounts payable, audit. What you need to do is bring them in early as possible, even in potentially part of the process design, because what my lesson learned was I have to ask the question, then I have to ask it at like 10 times before I can get the true answer I'm looking for. So it's bring everyone on at day one, that your support partners, so that they're informed, they're up to date. If somebody asks them, they can explain the status of the project, because what that does is it eliminates any type of confusion or miscommunication down the line, and it's also more individuals that are cheerleaders for your solution.
Yep, makes sense.
So Scott, a follow-up question, because as you describe it, this is kind of P2P 2.0 at the Mentor Network. So curious, how did you justify the change in approach, both in quantifiable means, for example, a business case, or were there other more anecdotal or intangible ways that you kind of made the case for transforming the way that Procure-to-Pay is done? Okay,
well, I think there's two parts to that answer. First part is our Oracle IPROCUREMENT system, and I'm not here to bash Oracle because, it works great for lots of companies, but our Oracle implementation was not done correctly, and we have, daily production problems that delay orders. In addition to the limited number of licenses, it's not scalable. So part of, my challenge and presented to management saying I can only get to a certain point with the current systems, just because I can't expand it to everybody else. And then, I would say the second one is that we have, as I mentioned, 6,000 P cards out there. The P cards were distributed because out in the field, the care providers had to get what they had to get. A lot of what they did was local, and we didn't. And what the challenge is there is, we do about $75 million on P card, of which about 60 million of it is purchases, and we have no visibility into the product or service they're buying. We know who did it, what they spent, and who they spent it with. And in addition to that, having that many cards out there, with the level of turnover we have is a big risk. So one of the benefits, and this was from our CFO, was moving certain or mandating certain types of purchases. Like if you're buying an asset, it has to go through P2P, and then limiting the P cards to emergencies and other types of purchases which are better off, like travel for P cards. So I think those are kind of the two really main points. And when you tell somebody that, okay, I took you from $2.5 million in savings, I bumped it up, and I may save you $7. Now I'm going to save you over $6. If I can put this in place, I'm probably going to save you between $8 and $10 a year going forward. That has a big impact, especially being part of finance.
So, Scott, I saw one of the questions coming in. Actually, since you're talking about Oracle and some of the integration, and it's actually a question that I had too, was what's nice is it seemed like you had lots of different payment methods on the back end potentially that you're using, whether it was check or P card or EFT. So I assume that in this setup, basically you would set up either the ACH details behind the scenes or the P card settlement. So you're trying to really drive the right behaviors up front to kind of drive it through PO, et cetera. And if you still want to settle on the back end via P card or via an ACH, great, you're kind of doing that. But it sounds like you're getting off of the P card as kind of, I don't call it the drug, but kind of the easy thing to, the way to buy stuff and really using it much more selectively, in the system. So is that a fair statement, or on your
Yes, and one of the items, because of the limitations and the process for our current, we have 3 punch-out catalogs. Each one has a ghost card, so everything's charged through the ghost card, and we get rebates and incentives on the back end. But what we cannot do with our current system, and we will be able to do in P2P, is reduce the number of P cards and increase the number of ghost cards. So as we set up a supplier, or as we set up a division, we could issue a credit card for that division. So we have all of the department information, we have all the GL information. We're just using that to be able to take advantage of credit card incentives. Yeah. So what it's doing is taking it away from the individual out in the field. It's more centralizing management of it.
And not getting dragged down in the card administration, and making that just much more efficient using the system rather than having to deal with all these cards. Yeah.
Exactly. And not to mention, Scott, I guess getting rid of some of those 500,000 plus invoices.
Oh, that's the other thing is part of our solution. It's one of the goals is we're going to try to reduce in the first year at least 40% of the paper invoices. Even our accounts payable department is they're chewing at the bit, saying, when can this happen? Because right now everything is faxed in, it's brought up on a screen, and it's manually entered. Every one of those 528,000 invoices. So I'm looking to be able to. My long-term goal is we have 17 people in accounts payable, looking to reduce that number by more than half and move them over to accounts receivable where they really need to be.
Your friendly moderator is going to hop in here for a sec. I want to make sure we give a chance for the audience to ask some questions. Pierre and Richard, your questions are great. I have one here for Scott. Are all of your workflow approvals housed in your P2P, or is it in Oracle and fed to your P2P?
They're all in P2P. And one of the reasons is, as I mentioned earlier, in Oracle, if we have to change workflow, we have to put a request into IT and get in line. In P2P, my systems administrator can go in, make the change, and it's active immediately. And in what we're now doing is, kind of for future planning, is I'm talking with human resources to be able to get a feed out of our HR database, which has an approval code, so that once we start rolling out to the entire company, as people's HR records are changed with what they can and can't approve, it'll automatically feed into P2P, so there's no additional burden on the systems administrator, particularly considering some of our divisions we have upwards of an 80% turnover rate.
Great. And actually, it looks like we're getting toward the top of the hour. I know everyone is very busy and has to rush off to all their other meetings, so I think we'll go ahead and wrap there. We still had a couple audience questions, so we'll be sure to follow up with you individually. And maybe perhaps even show some blogs on all these topics on Spend Matters next week. I'll work with Pierre on that one. So please remember, we have a very quick survey that will pop up as the webinar ends. Your feedback is invaluable to us. I'd like to really, really thank Pierre, Scott, and Richard for being here with us today, and I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of the week.
Thanks, Sheena.
Thank you.